Miscommunications in relationships. It happens to all of us all the time, and it's not an easy subject for us to deal with. We were having a pre-conversation here about this tough topic, and it's really vital because how do you communicate with your spouse, with your son, daughter, mother, father, in such a way that they understand, and then results actually happen where actions occur where your needs are met, whether emotionally, intellectually, or with a spouse, sexually. I mean, there's a whole lot of ways to communicate. And do we communicate in a way that is effective? And I would say for the most part, we do not. And we've all been responsible for not communicating well. And I think it goes to the point that was mentioned right before this video was we get into ruts. We get into these situations where your spouse comes home, you go through the same routine, you have something on your mind, you really don't want to talk about it because then you know you're going to be going to bed late, it might start some friction, you get nervous about it, then you don't talk about it, and your spouse or significant other might say, "Oh, what's wrong with you? Why are you acting different?" And you're thinking, "Well, God, I really want to talk to you about something, but I just don't want to get into it." And then all of a sudden that creates all sorts of festering, and then the next day, if the moods don't change, then all of a sudden that carries over, then there's some distance, and then all of a sudden, because of that lack of communication, the spiral starts going downward until you come to some sort of resolution. It's not easy to communicate with the people that you really love because those are the ones you fear the most rejection from in a big way. And you don't want to seem stupid to the most important people in your life. You know, there's certain situations that I would have been in where you think, God, I really have this intellectual interest and I would like to pursue this thing. And you go, well, I don't know if I would even want to talk to my spouse about that because what if she's turned off by that? And not turned off sexually, just turned off like mentally, like there's some sort of invisible sort of wall, this force field that could get between us.
Or they have the exact same emotions as you and that they know that this could be a long conversation and they might not want to get into it either. That's why it's one of those things that's important to not shelf it, but to say, hey, there's something that we might need to talk about. We don't want to make an argument. This is what I kind of want to say. Maybe we can both formulate some of our thoughts on it and come back to it because you might not be ready to talk about it. I might not be ready to talk about it. So maybe you might even have to schedule a conversation, which sounds kind of crazy to schedule something in your own life, but do you want to have a good line of communication and results, or do you want to just halfway do something and then everybody's going to be disappointed at the outcome? It's much better to plan it out and have something and some points that you're willing to say. Also, it's a good idea that if one person is talking and it's something important to you or the other person, y'all don't interrupt each other. Maybe you have some form of talking stick, or you just say, all right, that's my thoughts. Now give me yours. Because it can easily happen that you're in a conversation and it turns into an argument when you start talking over each other. Because the other person thinks that their points are just as valid as your points if they're for the positive or the negative. And that can turn really ugly really fast. And these are the things that we're trying to avoid. And we have Yessie here, and Yessie was just talking about her relationship and how she has just started to really come into her own and start exploring some of these ideas. Yessie?
Yes, you actually brought up a really great point that me and my ex-partner had got into the habit of doing, which was scheduling a conversation. If I would come home or he had something on his mind or I had something on my mind, and right at that moment we weren't able to discuss it because either I'm cooking or we're cleaning or we're tending to the kids or whatever it was, and it was something that we didn't want to speak in front of the children because it was sensitive. It was either just not for them, it was about our relationship or something that we might have triggered or whatever it was. We would tell each other, hey, before you go to bed tonight, if you don't mind, could we sit down? There's, a few things. And sometimes it would just, either be me or him. I'd be like, hey, do you have a few minutes? Let's sit down and chat. There's something that I need to get off my chest. You may not have anything to say, but I do have something to say. And so he would also do the same to me. He would come and tell me, hey, before you go to bed, tonight, do you think that we could have a conversation? There's some things that we need to sit down and talk about. Sometimes we kind of already knew what it was about, and it was things that we didn't really just want to talk about. There was nights where I'm like, hey, dude, I'm tired. I don't want to sit here because I know you say 30 minutes, but it's going to drag into a 2-3 hour, an all-nighter conversation that I just don't have the energy to dive into right at the moment. But it was the fact that we sat there and we told each other, hey, there are some things that we need to talk about. There are some things that, we need to go ahead and lay out on the table before we put it on the shelf and let it sit back there and collect dust. And then later, a month from now, it blows up. And we're like, why didn't you tell me this, when you felt that way at the beginning, instead of waiting, this amount of time. Now you've built up even more feelings and you have put onto that. And now you're talking to me with animosity or with anger or whatever it may be that has built up with that, versus if you would have had came to me when it was fresh, we could have fixed that issue then.
Something that I found that is really valuable in communication, especially with my spouse, is going into the conversation with the intent of being positive. And going into the intent of, well, I'm super lucky that Jill and I have not had any, which is so strange. We have not had any major conflicts at all. It's quite phenomenal and extremely wonderful. But we do have, as everybody, these little bitty things that might bother one of us from time to time. And it is very easy to talk about it because both of us, and I think this is the requirement of all communication, both parties have to be 100% willing and open, knowing that the vulnerabilities and the fear does not need to be there, because the foundation of love and caring and compassion and understanding is underlying that. So if both parties are communicating from that level, it is much easier to listen and absorb that and say, oh, okay, I didn't realize that this particular action made you feel a certain way that you don't like to feel that way. And then you can listen, but you also have to take it the next step for the action. The action has to back up whatever you agree to or whatever you understand to be a problem. You're like, oh, I didn't know that was bad. You can't just start going and doing the same bad thing the next day if you are wanting to maintain and to continue to grow that relationship. I mean, if you don't care, then you don't change. All of us have been in relationships where you express, hey, this is really bothering me, your behavior in this way, and you think you have it resolved, and then their behavior continues to do things that hurt you in some way, or maybe they are condescending, or maybe they're rude, or they whatever activity or action they take that you find offensive, they just don't stop whenever you've had the conversation. And then all of a sudden you got to have another conversation. Hey, I thought we resolved this. Apparently we haven't. You continue to do this, and I'm not on board with what you're doing. And I wish you would stop it. And then all of a sudden, if that doesn't stop, now you got the situation where both parties are not 100%. You got one over here at 40 and another one at 100 or 80. And then all of a sudden it just starts crumbling and goes away.
Well, there's a couple things that I'd like to make a point on, Yessie, and yours. I'll address yours first. This is something that Ashley and I do, is that, of course we're going to bother each other, and there's going to be things that we do that we don't like, and there's going to be actions that we wish our partner would change. But let's be honest and fair. We can't change most of our actions overnight. So if you can get into a habit of non-aggressively just stating a point like, you did it again, and like just let it pass, but just let the other person know and acknowledge that, remember that talk we had? Let's not forget about that talk, and let me just keep it fresh in your mind because you did that, but I'm not going to dwell on it. Just please be better. And then now let's move on. But now I've addressed that you've done that, so I've got my feelings out that, again, I don't want to have the full conversation, but just think back. It's like that bookmark you put in a book. Dang it, I did it again. Now, if I'm the one that had that action, I think, okay, I messed up and she didn't make it an argument. That is a really, really nice form of conversation and flow in a relationship, because you know that they just called you out on something without making it a huge deal, but it's something that you can reflect on later. And you know that they are looking out for you trying to be better because they know that y'all have had that conversation, and they also know that they pointed it out, and then you didn't make a big deal out of it, but you're going to try to do better. And it can work both ways. But again, that's something you have to build on and be conscious of, and it takes a lot of work in a relationship. These things aren't going to happen overnight. And into Yesse's point, if something's going to take all night long, say it's something that you have with your partner that you know is going to be a big conversation, and you know that you're not going to have that conversation until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, but say it's going to be hard for you to sleep, a really good practice is just putting pen to paper and you expressing your thoughts for the other person to read. Say, I know that this is going to be a big conversation and we didn't have it last night because you weren't ready for it, or maybe I wasn't ready for it because I didn't have all of my thoughts formulated on the matter, but I couldn't sleep last night, but I didn't let it bother me as much as it should have. It didn't weigh on me. I put my thoughts and emotions on paper. I made the paper take my emotions, and I got it out of my head and onto the paper. And you know that your partner is going to read that, and then if they can't have the conversation after they read it, maybe they can write you something back. Because in writing, just like we talk about in text and on Facebook and social media, everybody's 10 foot tall and bulletproof. You can say what you need to say and what you really want to say without that fear of immediate confrontation. And it gives you a point like, all right, I'm giving you this at your day. Would you please read it? And they can think about it throughout the day. And at first they might be like, oh, I didn't do that. They get upset. And they start dwelling a little bit and like, okay, maybe I was a little bit off. And then you start thinking and thinking and thinking. It's like, okay, now how do I want to formulate my thoughts so I don't hurt my partner? So maybe I will write them something back. And it gives a space for them to be creative and you to be creative. And it doesn't have to turn into an initial argument. And it doesn't necessarily have to take up so much time and energy because you're using what most people would think is an outdated form of communication, but it's a tried and trusted method all throughout the course of history, writing letters back and forth. And the best part about that is, all right, let me have that letter back, and you burn it if that's something that you don't need or don't want to be seen. And that's another form of just letting the energy go into the ether. You had that bad thought, and maybe y'all come together and say, all right, well, here's our letters that we wrote. That was a bad topic for both of us, but I think we've worked that out now. Let's have a little ceremony or something. Let's light it on fire. And those thoughts are gone into the ether, and now that is not going to trouble us anymore. Or you at least go into the intention of that not being our troubling anymore.
Yeah, that is a very, very good practice. There are a lot of communications that happen too that a lot of people aren't even aware of. Like, we communicate with our eyes. We communicate with our hand gestures. Some people have what's been referred to as love languages. Some people are just really, they want touchy-feely. They need hugs a lot. Some people need actions. Like, they want to have some flowers every now and then. They want to have a romantic love note given to them on occasion. They want to have the occasional dinner out or picnic or whatever their method of feeling loved is. And to a lot of people, it's a lot different. Some people just aren't big fans of getting hugs, and then their spouse really needs hugs all the time. Some people don't like to say I love you all the time because they feel like their actions express their love. I do all of these things for you all the time. I don't feel like I need to say I love you 50 times a day. Some people that becomes aggravating, and then their spouse is like, it sure would just be nice if you told me you love me all the time, even though I know you do and you do all these things for me. I still want to hear it. So there has to be compromises within that, because if you are committing yourself to another person to build your life with, then you know there's going to have to be some compromises to your own behavior. Or you just hit it off so well that y'all both agree on everything, when that's pretty difficult. I mean, for most people. And so you have to be willing. You know, a lot of men are like, oh, me, man, I can't tell you I love you all the time. That's just kind of stupid. I think that is, well, to all the men, we have a large male audience, and it's kind of stupid, guys. I mean, you need to be able to express yourself, even if you're uncomfortable with it. Just start saying it enough. If you mean it, you know, if you actually mean it, just say it. You know, it makes your spouse or significant other feel better. Just do it. It's not hurting you. Does it make you feel a little uncomfortable? You know, I mean, just say it. I mean, with male relationships, that's a whole different thing. You know, like, I'm not going to tell Trey over here I love him every time I see him. That'll just be goofy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there are some people that do that. I mean, we have a brother that does that with basically everybody.
Yeah, every single person that he's even remotely acquainted with. Oh, I love you, man. It's great to see you. But the problem with that is it's not genuine. So you really have to love them. Because then it's annoying. When you know they really don't love you and they tell you that they love you, you're like, come on, dude. I'm not even telling you that back because I know you're full of crap. So everything has to be genuine. It has to be 100%. Like, I asked our grandpa, who was married to our grandma for 65 years, what was the secret for y'all's longevity? Because they were always seemingly very happy. I spent all of my formative years with my grandparents, of course with my mother and father, and all that stuff. But I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. And when he would get home from work, she would have dinner cooked every time. And so he would do all the dishes. He would put up everything and clean. And that's what he told me. He said, we lived a long relationship. We had a long, happy relationship because if she cooks, I do the dishes. And I just thought, what? That's it. What do you mean? There's more to a relationship than that. And then whenever he died, she never learned how to drive. And so he had to take her anywhere she wanted to go. And she did not know what key opened the front door because he always opened the door for her. And I just thought that was an amazing thing because I didn't realize that. We are there at the house after Grandpa has passed away, and everybody's trying to figure out what key opens the front door, and she has no idea. And that's a phenomenal thing to me. That's kind of something you won't see, I don't think, in today's society. That would be pretty rare. But he was very accommodating to whatever needs that she had. And that is just with everybody. I think, as brothers, we're pretty accommodating. You know, if there's something you need, or if I ask you, hey, can I borrow a piece of equipment from y'all? And you're already coming over here, okay, can you just drive it over? You know, I mean, we don't think like, oh, well, that's a pain in the ass. I don't want to do that for him. You know, you really don't think anything about it. You're like, that's my brother. Of course I could do it. You know, well, who cares? You know, what does it take, 10 extra minutes or 15? You know, that's what brothers and people that you love, you do stuff for each other. So that's another form of communication. My brother tells me that he loves me without saying it because he brings a piece of equipment over, and I say thank you, and he knows I mean it. So it's not, hey, I'm going to do something for you, but I'm expecting you to do something back. There's not that. It's just we are always knowing that we're giving and taking all the time. And when that's 100% understood with both parties, man, the relationship's a lot better. I mean, sometimes I have a need to say I love you. It's not very often, but I do sometimes. Like, hey, Dad, I love you. Want to hug you. Sometimes, he doesn't do it anymore since I pointed out, because it goes to communication. I would get annoyed sometimes when I knew he was hugging me just, come here, bro, I'm going to tell you bye, so I'm just going to hug you. And, overbearing sort of hug that I knew he wasn't meaning it. He was just being a dick. But then a dick like a brotherly way, like a nice kind of, well, y'all know what I mean.
It's like when you see puppies when they're fighting and they're trying to tear each other's face off, but they're just playing. It's that kind of thing.
It's cute and adorable.
Yeah, so everything goes to communication. So if you let things bottle up inside of you, you just end up exploding. And that's why most relationships fail, whether they're siblings that don't like each other or spouses. That's one of the reasons why the divorce rate is so high. We don't put a real value on the sacred nature of relationships, because whenever we spend time with each other, like me and you, Yessie, we spend a lot of Sundays together now, and I feel now, after you've been coming here so much, that we are able to communicate. Like, I enjoy talking to you. You bring value to me, and I want to bring value to you, so we can know each other, help each other, grow together as humans. And when you see something, like if I was doing something rude or inappropriate out here at the farm somewhere, or said something that you didn't agree with, that you would be able to easily go, hey, Kevin, whatever. Knowing that I would not be upset. Like, oh, all right, I get that. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to, say a bad word in front of your kids or something. It's whatever it might be. Even though I might do that by accident, but but I wouldn't mean to. So those things happen, and as long as we are all willing to go, hey, I know that I'm going to make mistakes. I know that maybe I want to hug my brother and show him how I'm dominant. Maybe I'm feeling aggressive and I need to voice that out with a few cuss words, and I didn't realize that a kid was around. Like, oh, sorry. That just happens. It's part of being human. We all just do these things, and we're so accustomed to our behavior that if we're okay with somebody telling us or pointing it out, hey, you do this a lot and it's pretty annoying. And if you have that safety factor in a relationship, you're like, oh, yeah, I did. And you're not like, no, I don't do that. I'll never do that. F you. I never say that. People do it all the time. That's one reason why people don't want to talk to their friends or their spouse or whatever about an issue, because they're afraid they're going to get that mirror reaction, or not even a mirror, reflective. You throw out that softball and you get back a bombardment of missiles thrown back out at you. Instead of that being the point, they bring up stuff from 6 months ago or 6 years ago. Yeah, but if I did that, you remember when you did this and this and this and this and this, and you're like, crap, we're not even talking about that. I was just wanting to express this. So we have to be really aware of how our energies are projected, because if we go into it with anything trying to express ourselves and our energy's bad, we're probably going to get bad energy back. And if we go into it with good energy and then whoever we're talking to gives back bad, we got to figure out how to deflect that. Okay, if I can't just de-escalate the situation, then I need to create that open space that our friend Gil often says. I can't communicate with you when you act this way. So until you can come back to me when we are on a level that we can mutually conversate in a way that is beneficial for us both, then we don't need to be talking. I don't want my energy to be all screwed up because you are being screwed up back to me. I just want to have a nice conversation, whether it's brief or long, depending on the situation. And that's it.
And if you don't think that that's an option, that from experience that you're going to get that kind of energy back, you still is not an excuse to not do that activity. What you should do is, if you know or you have a big, strong likelihood that that's going to happen, is just set yourself up like this time is not going to work out. Like you're going to fail, but then you just push a little bit. You just do a little bit and a little bit and a little bit. Like you're building a building. You think any large building was built in a day? No, you put one brick on top of another brick. So, all right, I tried that. Well, that didn't work. Well, let me try again, and maybe try a couple more times. If it's still not working, maybe try another little different tactic. But you have to realize that nothing's going to change in a day. And then another thing that I think, to your point of most relationships fail because of communication, I think it also goes to people don't realize how much they change. Because I've heard this countless times. Oh, it's not the same person I married, or it's not the same person when we were dating. Well, of course it's not the same person when you were married or when you were dating, or 6 months ago or a year. Physically, you're a completely new person with every cell in your body on a year-by-year basis. Mentally, you're a different person of what you're exposed to, what's going on in the world. We can go back to 2 years ago, and the world is completely different now than it was back then. Everyone on a complete global scale has changed mentally, whether you intended to or not. We're not the same people that we were 2 years ago, just based on the outside influences and what we were and were not able to do. So we have to understand that as humans, mentally and physically, we are not the same people, and we're not going to be the same people. What you have to think about and want to do is think, do I want to keep going down this path with this person at this growth rate? Do I want to try to change this growth rate and pattern? Do I want to try to weave these growth rates and patterns together? Because if you leave a garden untended, weeds will grow in it. Your relationship is much like a garden. You have to put in the work. You have to water it. You have to weed it. You have to do everything that is right. You have to harvest it at the right time. You have to take care of your soul. You have to do these things in a relationship, just like that. You got to make sure your relationship's getting enough sunlight. You got to make sure your relationship is getting everything it needs. Your relationship is a living organism in itself. Just the fact that there are two people in a room, y'all have energy, and when you have a relationship, that changes. You're not the same person when your partner is around and when they're not around. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You're just different. Because there's some things, when you're out with the guys, you talk about things that you wouldn't talk about when your partner's there. Just like you, Yessie, when there's you and your sister sitting there talking, you'll have a different form of conversation than when your significant other's there. Because y'all have that garden of relationship with each other, and it has different fruits and vegetables or flowers growing in it than with your significant other relationship. And all things need to be treated that way, that not every relationship is the same. People have different energy, and the energies that you want to put into it.
I really like how you explained that, because I was just talking to a friend about it, about relationships, and how every day we are somebody different. If there's one thing that is constant, is change. We're constantly changing. We're constantly evolving and growing every single day. You learn something new about yourself, So imagine how it is to try to live with someone else when you're trying to still learn yourself. Now you're learning yourself and learning that person as well, learning what they like, what they dislike, what makes them uncomfortable, what all these different factors come into place that are going to build that relationship. Like you say, you have to, tend to your garden, water it. You have to give it the sunlight that it needs. You have to give it the love and care and affection, everything that comes with that. One thing I did express to her, though, was that although you tend to the garden, the other person has to be giving the same as well. You cannot continue to fill someone's cup while there's no one pouring into your cup. Because how are you going to grow if you're constantly pouring into somebody else, pouring all your energy to someone else to help them better themselves, to help them reach the level where you're at? Because like you said, we're always growing. Some of us grow at different paces. Some of us are different type of frequencies. We might have met and connected at this point in our life, and we may enjoy each other and love each other, but there will come times where we're on different frequency levels. And if I'm up here or if I'm down here and we're just not matching, you can either come and match me, or you can stay where you're at, but I'm gonna still continue to evolve and grow. And if that I may be pronouncing, I have trouble pronouncing reciproc
Reciprocate.
reciproc reciprocating. If you're not reciprocating the same energy that I'm giving back to you, that's when it starts to become sometimes, as far as toxic, yeah, the balance is not there anymore. And as long as you can learn to be aware of when that happens and make note of it and be able to express that with your partner and hope that they are able to understand it and get in your shoes and say, you know what, I know exactly how you feel. I'm sorry, I didn't know that it affected you like that. Let me make that change. Obviously, like Trey said, it's not going to happen overnight. It takes practice. It takes a lot of practice, just like it takes practice to do anything else.
I think it's important, what we've all said in our own ways, is that coming together with whoever you're in with this relationship, both people have to be at 100%, or at 80. Both people have to be at 80 or whatever level you needed to be on. And we have to look at ourselves, which is so difficult because we really don't like to look at ourselves for the most part. Most people just don't enjoy it unless they get into the habit of it. It's just like anything else, working out, or if you don't like to read and you force yourself to, then over time you really like it. Same way with working out or doing anything that seems difficult at first. One thing that I learned about myself with Jill, we get married and she has at the time, I think it was 10. It has to be 10. Well, he's playing baseball. I can't stand any of those sports. I'm a very physical person and work out and do all these physical things, but I don't like organized sports at all for a whole host of reasons. And I'm just thinking, all right, this is probably the main thing in our relationship that is going to be difficult for me, because as a mother, she feels very strongly about giving the support of actually being at those games and supporting her son, and I totally understand and respect that. My concern was, okay, well, she's only off because she's a nurse every other weekend, and so now during those seasons, I'm not going to be able to spend that time with her because we got to go to some stupid game. That's what I'm telling myself in my head. I'm like, this is going to be difficult for me. So I started to think about it, and I think this is a good exercise for everybody. That's why I'm telling the story. It's like, okay, what can I do that would make this agreeable for me, and that she would be good with it, and that it would make all of our relationships, it was Parker, which is the son, and Jill and me. What would make all of us be able to go, okay, this is great. I'm glad you're at this game. And, well, I have work to do. Saturdays is my really relaxed day of working. I'm just but I like to do it at a real slow pace and sip my coffee slow and do my work slow and just be really calm about everything. I'm like, how am I going to do this at a game? So I just get my big briefcase, I fill it full of my work, and I have this reclining chair that's an outside chair. So I load it up in our cart. I go to the game, and I have my mobile office just like I would have at home. And if I want to listen, sometimes I like to listen to my audiobooks on Saturday. So I just plugged it in one ear. One ear's open so I can still talk to Jill. And I'm totally fine. If we can figure out ways to accommodate our own needs at the same time accommodating the ones we love and their needs, man, it's okay. Like now, I don't care if we go to a game or not. Like it doesn't mean what one way or another to me. I'm like, all right, I got stuff to do, and it's stuff I can easily do at a game because now I already figured it out. And Jill's totally fine with it. She knows that I have stuff to do and that I want to do, and she knows that I can't stay in organized sports. And she's very thankful that I'm there, and she enjoys me being there, and I enjoy being beside her, even though it's at a game. And I love the stepson. Like I genuinely love him, and I'm glad he's having a good time because he is having a good time playing. If we can look at ourselves and try to find solutions instead of allowing that, because I've seen friends and whenever I was younger just go, I'm not doing that. That's stupid. I'm not wasting my time. I'm not going to some stupid game when I don't want to go to a stupid game. That's what I easily could have told myself instead of instantly finding a solution. It wasn't something that I drug out and told her once or twice, or I never told her any time. I just went and figured out how to make that work for me, and it worked for her. And the point is, there are solutions with practically everything. As long as we're willing to make a little adjustments with ourselves and a little adjustment with our partner, that it can be okay. Everybody can come out feeling good and loved and respected and supported without instantly throwing up that, I hate this crap, I'm not doing that. You can figure out ways to make yourself okay with it.
Yes, so you were taking notes. Do tell. You had something you want to say, I know.
Well, actually, I was writing down what Kevin was saying about how there's a solution for everything, finding something within us or for us that to accommodate us in situations where we're not just always comfortable in. I began to read this book. It's called The Gift of Adversity. And there was a little chapter, and I can't remember all of it. I think I might have read this part either yesterday. I can't remember. But it says something along the lines of, sometimes we get in these, whether if it's a job, a relationship, whatever it may be, they use the example of girl at work, which I could resonate because this last place that I was at, there were quite a few things that I was told to do that I wasn't comfortable doing because I didn't like that whole, you have to do this, you need to do that. And I'm like, wait a minute, that apart from the duties of the job, so it kind of it would bother me sometimes, that they would tell me you have to do this or you can't do this or you can't do that. And I'm like, that's not part of the job description. But I understand that in order for me to, one, keep my job, in order so that I can take care of my children and my family and my needs and all of that, I have to be okay with doing things that are uncomfortable to me, but also finding a way that it didn't rub me so much in the wrong way so that I could still achieve or finish the task that I needed to do in order to keep my job and, continue to be okay with. And throughout life, that's just how it is. You're going to have to do things that may seem uncomfortable to you, but as long as you find those accommodations that make it less, stressful or just less irritating for you, it's always great to have those accommodations and to learn, those things that you can do for yourself to just make it easier for you and for the other party on the other side too.
Yeah, it's very important.
Yeah. Well, the old adage that no news is ever as good or as bad as it first appears. There's always some time on reflection that you can look back and say, okay, or not okay.
Sometimes whenever we think or if we have a conversation, something comes up, it's best if you instantly feel aggravated, just not to say anything for a few minutes. Just let it settle. Don't let that natural sort of, well, it's natural for a lot of people because they haven't learned to control it and make the controlled thing natural. But people just want to explode right back at you. Even if you said something calm, like, hey, this is not good for me. What do you mean it's not good for you? People do that all the time.
What's a natural reaction for humans when someone feels like they're being pushed? The initial reaction is to push back. Like that's just how people interact with each other. If you're coming at me, well, then I'm going to give it back. It's the same. It's a mirror thing, you know. If you're giving out bad energy, they're going to give you bad energy back. So sometimes it's best just to let me think about that for a minute.
Dude, that's a good point. It's kind of like in a lot of our self-defense and martial arts training. You touch me, I'm going to touch you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, well, we have to learn how to touch in the way that is reflective of how we feel and our intent in the situation. If I feel like you're touching me in a way that I'm enjoying, you're giving me a nice hug, then great. Or if I think you're about to try to push me and palm strike me to the chin, I'm not going to enjoy that. So we're going to have to make adjustments in my actions. Those are just important things to do. Well, I love this conversation. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me in this conversation is that all of the best outcomes of relationships, from my experience, has been both people rising to the occasion to communicate on a level where both parties not only want to respect and listen to each other, but also find a way to make the accommodation, find a solution to the issue, be willing and move in the actions that make it better, that resolve the issue. Because when both parties come from that good place of intent and willingness and want and do move in that forward direction after communicating, man, it just makes life so much better. It's so much better when you go to have a conversation and feel the good intention. You can't really have a conversation if me and you are in a relationship and I don't want to talk to you or you don't want to talk to me and I'm trying to force the issue, but you're not into it. And so we don't even, you're not listening to me. I'm trying to talk to you. Then it just goes out of control. That's how a lot of people go through their life. And that is very unfortunate. I say don't do that.
Well, there is not any conversation when you're growing up in most people's household, and definitely not in the schooling system of how to interact with our fellow humans. There's none of that. The only interaction that is given is on a sports field, and that's always negative action to negative action. That's one of the things where I think sports are a great disservice to all of mankind, is because you are actively opposing people at every turn. We pay big money to support those things instead of working on how to get along with each other or at least communicate with each other. All of what we're taught is to counteract someone else and to keep them down and for you to get ahead.
Wow, you just made such a great point. It is true. We go through these indoctrination camps, which most people call schools, and we're not taught how to respect somebody else when they're speaking, how to genuinely listen to them, and how to express ourselves back. That's not taught at all. Most people only get that from their parents, and the majority of parents don't actually sit down and have lengthy, wonderful conversations with their kids about important topics. It's pretty rare, especially as they get into their formative teenage years where it's most important from, say 12, 13, 14, really through the rest of their life. But those years where they're really developing, wow, is that ever critical? And we don't do that. So how do we expect the divorce rates not to be through the roof when we live our formative years not even developing listening skills?
Not only listening skills, I mean, go back to my point of how we're taught how to really be mean to each other. What is a common football cheer when we were growing up was, go fight, kill, to hurt the other people, or how hard you hit that person, going back to the sidelines and getting congratulated of how much you tried to inflict damage on the other person. Of when is that ever going to be applicable in real life? It's never going to. What you're going to need is how to get along with people and not how to fight other people. Or what are the topics, or what do you see on sports? And the big highlights is when somebody shakes somebody or they make a move, they make a fool out of the other person. Well, that translates into the real world of, I need to make a fool out of you so I feel better about myself. That is why sports are evil. They are not good. That is a detriment to society, and that is hurting all of our relationships. It's not talking about how to communicate with someone else to get a higher goal achieved. It's some useless medal where we teach kids that the peak of their life is playing football out on Friday night.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think it even goes beyond that on a communication level. We are teaching these kids how to not only not communicate, but the communication that they are telling themselves, like you just said, at pep rallies or the cheerleaders on the side, let's go kill them, get them, rough, rah, rah, ree, kick them in the knee. It's like always destroying them, which then prepares them as they get into the world and they see, especially the past 100 years, there's always some war or conflict going on within every generation. And we're already brainwashed and indoctrinated to believe that's okay. So when we hear the war cries of whoever, we're already used to it. We're already propagandized to the degree we say, oh, well, we accept that. Well, let's go kick them in the knee. It's just...
It's because we're taught negative communication skills when there should be a higher emphasis on great communication, actually how to resolve issues, things that we're going to use in the real world, how to sit down with our partner, how to communicate with them, how to even think about our own thoughts. There's so many of our own thoughts that I think people have a problem communicating because they don't really understand what's going on in their head. Not that they've not examined themselves, but they don't have the skills how to examine themselves. They don't even know how to sit back and reflect. It's not necessarily that people don't want to look at themselves. It's that they don't know how to look at themselves. They see themselves as the hero in their own narrative. They see themselves as, well, I'm this person and everybody else is against me. They don't see themselves as a cooperative member of society. They don't understand that I might not have the exact skills on how to communicate with somebody, that I've got to learn those skills, that they don't see themselves or understand themselves, so they can't they can't make themselves understood to others. That's a whole nother practice in themselves. If you just sit in front of a mirror and talk to yourself in front of a mirror, or you just talk to yourself, occasionally I talk to myself. Well, I say occasionally. It's almost all the time. When I'm alone, I'm talking to myself because I happen to find my company exquisite.
I love all of your points there. I think that is fantastic. And yeah, I think most people talk to themselves, or I hope they do. I know I ramble all the time. I knew that we're going to have this, not this topic, but another topic that you and I planned. And I was talking to myself all morning about that topic. And what I find really wonderful in the art of communication and listening is sometimes you don't understand yourself fully on a particular thing until you begin the discussion. It requires okay, I have this thought, let me throw that out there. Let that get filtered with some other minds, and let's mesh this out so we can try to find out what the truth of the matter is. Because that is really... Sometimes you can talk to yourself, but you're only coming from this one angle, and you need a couple of other honest people that you feel safe having discussions with that you can bring out, that's a good point. I have this point. You can start bouncing these thoughts, and then that's a good way to start learning yourself. That's one reason why I love our Sundays so much, because we're able to bounce these things off of each other to try to figure out how to live our life better.
Well, Yessie, do you have anything further to add to the conversation?
Just this one thing right now, when you were talking about all that we have been taught is the negative, the go for the kill. in the same book that I was reading, he mentioned something, and it's crazy because we're talking about it right now. And he said how much different the world would have been if they would have taught us communication and empathy in school, growing up, learning in our homes, versus all of this other low vibrational negative, go for the kill type of thing, because that communication and empathy would have taken us to greater lengths, and can still. I'm not saying that it cannot, because we are in an era where people are starting to wake up to the to what is really actually going on, and starting to tap in and look further in to sit with themselves, and just learn themselves. And that, I think, is very important. Communication and empathy together is a great combination.
I think so too. And the big takeaway for me is just when you want to communicate, hopefully recognize that your other partner wants to communicate too, and go in with a positive intent. Because if you don't have a positive intent and working towards a resolution or some sort of accommodation, you're just at a loss.
My last closing statement is just remember that through this whole conversation is things take time. Nothing happens in a day. And if you want something to work, and if you want to get better at something, you have to practice and accept that you're going to fail, and realize that you're just going to pick yourself up and do it again. Because if you want something, you put the effort into it. And with that being said, I thank everyone out there for watching this conversation. I hope you enjoy it, watching it as much as we did filming it. You can catch us on all the alternatives. I won't mention them because there's such a long list, but anywhere you can find any videos, we're there. And have a good day.